You know about the heartless decisions taken by Queensland during this pandemic. We've been on them for weeks, even months, but they've reached a crescendo now, especially after 26-year-old Sarah Caisip was barred from attending her father's funeral in Brisbane yesterday, donning protective gear to be taken to a private viewing instead. Then there's the case of Mark Keynes, who's dying of cancer and was going to be forced to choose which of his 4 kids could visit from New South Wales to bid him farewell. A fantastic fundraising drive pushed along by the wonderfully passionate Paul Murray on this channel has raised more than $200,000 so the whole family can head north and go through quarantine to have some precious final time together. But there have been so many other cases, as you know, people diverted from hospitals or medical care, families split or torn apart. Queensland has been hardline, and Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk has talked tough. But now that the chips are down, now that most of the media is focused on this idiotic heartlessness and stubbornness, now the Premier is passing the buck.
And let me make it very clear, I don't make those decisions. I said to the Prime Minister I would refer it to the Chief Health Officer, and I did that. No, they're under. It's actually her decision. Under the Act, it's her decision. You've got to have someone who. You've got to take the clinical advice here.
No, Premier, you run the state. You dictate the pandemic response. You determine just how extreme the measures are and how much you'll bend to accommodate personal circumstances, social benefits and economic imperatives. What shameful buck passing. Too often the Queensland Premier uses her Chief Medical Officer to do the dirty work for her. For instance, Jeanette Young was pushed out yesterday to defend that horrible funeral decision.
We know that funerals are very, very high risk for transmission of the virus.
But this is the same Chief Medical Officer who came out in April to justify the opposite, to explain why when funerals were limited to 10 mourners, an exemption was granted for an Indigenous funeral to have 80 people turn up.
This particular funeral happening in Mackay, I have been involved with, and I have seen some of the very difficult decisions. This is a very significant elder for that community who has died, and normally they would expect many, many hundreds, if not thousands of people to attend. So right from the word go, they significantly limited the number of attendees.
What about that double standard? Why can exceptions be made for that funeral but not for one grieving daughter yesterday? And why is there a judgement made about whether a deceased person is a significant person or not? Aren't we all equal? Aren't we all entitled to the same considerations? This is really sickening stuff. But then if you look at what else the Premier, of course, the Chief Medical Officer said yesterday, you can see that perhaps the Queensland Government is quite open about the double standards.
I've given exemptions for people in entertainment and film because that's bringing a lot of money into this state.
This is Queensland in 2020 under the Palaszczuk Labor government. If you have money for the state, in you come. Otherwise, stay out. If they decide you are a significant person for a particular community, you can have 8 times more people at the funeral compared to ordinary folk. Or if you're not rich or don't tick any other boxes, you don't even get to attend your dad's funeral. But don't blame Anastasia Palaszczuk, she says. Don't blame me. Don't blame the Premier. She's handed over the levers of the state to someone else. Perhaps that wouldn't be a bad idea.